2 Kings 6:24 through 7:20. Devotional focus verse. Then a Lord on whose hand the king leaned answered the man of God and said, Behold, if the Lord would make windows in heaven, might this thing be? And he said, Behold, thou shalt see it with thine eyes, but shalt not eat thereof. 2 Kings 7:2. George Müller, 1805 through 1898, was a man of faith and prayer. When God put it in his heart to build orphanages for the many ragged children running wild in the streets of London, he had only 2 shillings, or 50 cents, in his pocket. Although he didn't make his wants known to anyone but God, over $7 million was sent to him for building and maintaining of these orphan homes. No matter how pressing the need, George simply renewed his prayers to God for a solution, and either money or food always came in time to save the situation. A well-known story is an example of his simple faith that God would provide. One morning, the plates, cups, and bowls on the table of the orphanage were empty. There was no food in the larder and no money to buy provisions. The children were waiting for their morning meal when Müller said, Children, you know we must be in time for school. Bowing his head, he said, Dear Father, we thank thee for what thou art going to give us to eat. As he spoke, there was a knock on the door. The baker stood there and said, Mr. Müller, I couldn't sleep last night. Somehow I felt you didn't have bread for breakfast, and the Lord wanted me to send you some. So I got up at 2 a.m. and baked some fresh bread and have brought it. Müller thanked the man. No sooner had this transpired than there was a second knock at the door. It was the milkman. He announced that his milk cart had broken down right in front of the orphanage, and he would like to give the children his cans of fresh milk so he could empty his wagon and repair it. No wonder, years later, when Müller traveled the world as an evangelist, he was heralded as the man who gets things from God. What a contrast between George Müller's faith and the disbelief of the official in our focus verse. At the time of our text, the people of Samaria were in a desperate situation after a prolonged siege. Famine had brought them to horrific straits. Then, under the direction of the Spirit of God, the prophet Elisha prophesied that plenty of food would be available the next day and at a low price. The official assisting the king did not believe it was possible. He said, Behold, if the Lord would make windows in heaven, might this thing be? He showed his lack of faith when he doubted the prophet Elisha's word, and consequently, his fate was to witness the miracle but not to participate in it. When we face impossible situations, it is easy to become preoccupied with the problems instead of approaching God with the spirit of expectancy for a solution. Are you facing a difficult situation today? Believe God and see what miracles He will do on your behalf. Background information. This passage details another attack by Syria on Israel and God's miraculous intervention. There were 3 kings in Syria's history who were named Ben-Hadad. The Ben-Hadad in today's text is probably the one who warred against Samaria earlier and surrendered to Ahab. Later, he commanded the army that killed Ahab. It is thought that Ahab's son, Jehoram, was probably king of Israel at this time. The full host of Syria was involved in this attack. They cut off Samaria, the capital of the northern kingdom, from any outside supplies or help, causing the people within the city to starve. A donkey was an unclean animal under the law, and therefore would not ordinarily be used for food. Yet, the price of a donkey's head was approximately $50. About a half cup of dove excrement cost $3. This may have been used either as food or fuel. Mothers were desperate enough to eat their dead children. The king of Israel, Jehoram, blamed Elisha for the situation and vowed to behead him. Some scholars believe his wrath may have been because Elisha encouraged the king not to surrender, but to repent and look to God for deliverance. Elisha's reference to the king as this son of a murderer may have been based on Ahab's killing of Naboth, or perhaps it referred to the king's own intent to kill Elisha. The elders of the city were with Elisha, so they must have supported him in whatever role he played during the siege. God let Elisha know the king's plan, and Elisha had the door barred so the messenger could not enter. The king followed soon, and his comment, "What, should I wait for the Lord any longer?" may have meant he intended to surrender to the Syrians. Elisha predicted two specific happenings. First, he foretold imminent deliverance. Grain would be sold in the city's marketplace. The prophet also predicted the death of a lord on whose hand the king leaned, a military captain or official, because this man did not believe Elisha's words. Both of Elisha's prophecies came to pass. Food was sold inexpensively the next day, and the captain saw, but died without partaking. The law required lepers to live outside the city. The desperation of the 4 lepers mentioned in the text caused them to go to the Syrian camp, which they discovered was deserted. God had caused the Syrians to hear the noise of a great host, distinctly hearing horses, chariots, and hosts of foot soldiers. They assumed Israel had hired help from the Hittites, who were to the north, and the Egyptians, who were to the south. The Syrians fled, strewing their belongings for about 25 miles, the distance from Samaria to the Jordan. Conclusion: when you face a difficult situation in your life, pray and trust the Lord to answer.
And it came to pass after this, that Ben-Hadad king of Syria gathered all his host, and went up and besieged Samaria. And there was a great famine in Samaria, and behold, they besieged it until an ass's head was sold for 80 pieces of water, and the 4th part of a cab of dove's dung for 5 pieces of silver. And as the king of Israel was passing by upon the wall, there cried a woman unto him, saying, Help, my lord, O king. And he said, If the Lord do not help thee, whence shall I help thee? Out of the barn floor, or out of the winepress? And the king said unto her, What aileth thee? And she answered, This woman said unto me, Give thy son, that we may eat him today, and we will eat my son tomorrow. So we boiled my son, and did eat him. And I said unto her on the next day, Give thy son, that we may eat him. And she hath hid her son. And it came to pass, when the king heard the words of the woman, that he rent his clothes, and he passed by upon the wall. And the people looked, and behold, he had sackcloth within upon his flesh. Then he said, God do so and more also to me, if the head of Elisha the son of Shaphat shall stand on him this day. But Elisha sat in his house, and the elders sat with him, and the king sent a man from before him. But ere the messenger came to him, he said to the elders, See ye how this son of a murderer hath sent to take away mine head? Look, when the messenger cometh, shut the door, and hold him fast at the door. Is not the sound of his master's feet behind him? And while he yet talked with them, behold, the messenger came down unto him. And he said, Behold, this evil is of the Lord. What should I wait for the Lord any longer? Chapter 7. Then Elisha said, Hear ye the word of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord, Tomorrow about this time shall a measure of fine flour be sold for a shekel, and 2 measures of barley for a shekel in the gate of Samaria. Then a lord, on whose hand the king leaned, answered the man of God, and said, Behold, if the Lord would make windows in heaven, might this thing be? And he said, Behold, thou shalt see it with thine eyes, but shalt not eat thereof. And there were 4 leprous men at the entering in of the gate, and they said one to another, Why sit we here until we die? If we say, We will enter into the city, then the famine is in the city, and we shall die there. And if we sit still here, we die also. Now therefore come, and let us fall unto the host of the Syrians. If they save us alive, we shall live, and if they kill us, we shall but die. And they rose up in the twilight to go unto the camp of the Syrians, And when they were come to the uttermost part of the camp of Syria, behold, there was no man there. For the Lord had made the host of the Syrians to hear a noise of chariots, and a noise of horses, even the noise of a great host. And they said one to another, Lo, the king of Israel hath hired against us the king of the Hittites, and the kings of the Egyptians to come upon us. Wherefore they arose and fled in the twilight, and left their tents, and their horses, and their asses, even the camp as it was, and fled for their life. And when these lepers came to the uttermost part of the camp, they went into one tent, and did eat and drink, and carried thence silver and gold and raiment, and went and hid it, and came again and entered into another tent, and carried thence also, and went and hid it. Then they said one to another, We do not well. This day is a day of good tidings, and we hold our peace. If we tarry till the morning light, some mischief will come upon us. Now therefore come, that we may go and tell the king's household. So they came and called upon the porter of the city, and they told them, saying, We came to the camp of the Syrians, and behold, there was no man there, neither voice of man, but horses tied, and asses tied, and the tents as they were. And he called the porters, and they told it to the king's house within. And the king arose in the night, and said unto his servants, I will now shew you what the Syrians have done to us. They know that we be hungry, therefore are they gone out of the camp to hide themselves in the field, saying, When they come out of the city, we shall catch them alive, and get into the city. And one of his servants answered and said, Let some take, I pray thee, 5 of the horses that remain, which are left in the city. Behold, they are as all the multitude of Israel that are left in it. Behold, I say, they are even as all the multitude of the Israelites that are consumed. And let us send and see. They took therefore 2 chariot horses, and the king sent after the host of the Syrians, saying, Go and see. And they went after them unto Jordan, and lo, all the way was full of garments and vessels, which the Syrians had cast away in their haste. And the messengers returned and told the king. And the people went out, and spoiled the tents of the Syrians. So a measure of fine flour was sold for a shekel, and 2 measures of barley for a shekel, according to the word of the Lord. And the king appointed the Lord, on whose hand he leaned, to have the charge of the gate. And the people trode upon him in the gate, and he died, as the man of God had said, who spake when the king came down to him. And it came to pass, as the man of God had spoken to the king, saying, 2 measures of barley for a shekel, and a measure of fine flour for a shekel, shall be tomorrow about this time in the gate of Samaria. And that Lord answered the man of God, and said, Now behold, if the Lord should make windows in heaven, might such a thing be? And he said, Behold, thou shalt see it with thine eyes, but shalt not eat thereof. And so it fell out unto him, for the people trode upon him in the gate, and he died.